Sometimes people say, well, if we're going to be in ministry for the long haul, we should really think about self-care, more sauna, more exercise, more rest, more days off. Make sure you see friends. Put the mobile phone away and have time in nature. And all of those things are good, but I'm not going to speak about any of those things. Because you can find those things on Instagram. You can find those things everywhere else. I'm going to signpost you to something different today. So what I'm going to say might not immediately appear to be something that will help you in the long haul. But I think that you will find whenever you reflect on today that you will have heard something that will help you in the years that come. And sometimes when we hear some things, like I'm going to say today, they need to be thought about. So I would encourage you to reflect on what I said today, because what I am saying today is the product of my own life and journey. So whenever I am telling you the experience that I want to share with you, I want you to know that this is a place that I also have come to realize is important, because we do life not for the short term. We do ministry not for the short term. Life and ministry are together. They're not separate. We do life and we do ministry. They're the same. So one of the things I want to think about today and want you to think about is that let's enjoy life, not just survive, but really to thrive. Okay? So how do we do that? There's a few things I'm going to talk about today, but I want to just explain to you that whenever we look at this subject overall, we need to look at it in a big context. And the big context that I want to look at is, how do we live? So there are three parts of that I want to think about. One is, what is our identity? Who are we? Not what do we do, who are we? The second part I want to think about is, what is our purpose? And the third bit is, what is our destiny? Okay, so those are the three things if you want to keep in mind what I'm going to say. Just like life, ministry is a whole life experience. It's every part of what we do. It's not just what we do in terms of vocation, but life is to be lived to the full. We believe that as Christians, don't we? We say that. We even tell people that whenever we're speaking. And then we walk off the stage and we don't really feel it. We think, life's hard. But then I go back to the stage and come on, people. And we try to encourage people. So I want to look at a few passages from the Bible. It's not a bad idea to take our inspiration from Scripture. It's a good place to start. We believe that it answers all of life's problems. I remember when I went to Sunday school, and whenever the teacher was asking questions, you used to get sweets if you answered the question correctly. And I remember bringing a friend of mine who wasn't a Christian and didn't know any answers to any questions, never heard of Moses, never heard of the Bible passages. And yet, whenever he went to Sunday school, he said to me, I have worked out that the answer to every question that we're asked is Jesus. So he got sweets every week. He put his hand, Jesus! And he kept getting sweets. And he loved coming to Sunday school for that reason. The answer to every problem that we have, we say, is Jesus. So I'm going to look at a number of passages that talk about identity, purpose, and destiny. What do we expect from the time together? Well, we all come to conferences for different reasons. You might be here out of curiosity. You might have been invited by a network. You might have been invited because somebody felt that it would help you make more contacts and meet more people. Whatever the reason that you're here, or whatever reason that it is that you wanted to come to this seminar, I'm glad you're here. Because what I want to share with you is my experience, and that's what I've been asked to share, because I believe that my experience will help you, and your experience will help me. So, I want you to understand what your true identity, your true purpose, and your destination will be. The roadmap for this journey that we're going to take is the Bible. And we're going to start with Psalm 22. And then we're going to look at Psalm 23. In order to get to Psalm 23, which is where I really want to think about leadership and our identity, purpose, and destiny, I want to start at Psalm 22 because it's a vital place to start, because we can't get to the shepherd's crook in Psalm 23 unless we first look at the cross in Psalm 22. And when we look at the cross in Psalm 22, it gives us our bearings through Psalm 23. So whenever we look at Psalm 22, we find all the experiences that are in life, and we come with tiresome weariness, we come with frustrations, we come with a disappointed in life, disappointed in people mentality. So I want to read Psalm 22. You can either follow it or you can just listen. My God, why have you abandoned me? Don't we feel that sometimes? We feel abandoned. Paul felt abandoned. People deserted him at the end of his ministry. He ended his ministry pretty much alone. Jesus identifies with this. Why are you so far away from me when I groan for help? Every day I call to you, my God, but you do not answer. Every night I lift my voice, but I find no relief. Wow. Can we identify with that some nights? Absolutely. And if you can't yet, you will. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you rescued them. They cried out to you and were saved. They trusted in you and were never disgraced. But I am a worm and not a man. He is questioning his identity in that statement. He's saying, I'm not even a man. Sometimes we feel that we're not even whatever it is we think we are or we're called to be. I'm not even a good person. I'm not even a good preacher. I'm not even anything good. I'm not a good husband, not a good father, not a good brother, whatever it is. We do question our identity as we go through life. Sometimes even today, I think, am I going to speak to these people? Why am I speaking to them? I have no right to speak to them. I question my identity. I'm going to get to what you do about that. He goes on to say, everyone who sees me mocks me. They sneer and shake their heads, saying, is this the one who relies on the Lord? Then let the Lord save him. One of the remarkable things about being at this conference is I have heard stories from people in countries where there is real hostility to what their lifestyle is in Christianity. They can identify with this. We're all from different cultures, different perspectives, different countries, but this is something we will all be able to identify with at some point in our lives. I have. Is this the one who relies on the Lord? Then let the Lord save him if the Lord loves him so much. Do we question, does the Lord love us so much? Do we question that sometimes? Does God really love me? If the Lord loves him so much, let the Lord rescue him. Yet you have brought me safely from my mother's womb and led me to trust you at my mother's breast. I was thrust into your arms at my birth. You have been my God from the moment I was born. And the Bible also tells us that he knew us from before we were born. He knew our identity from before we were in our mother's breast. Do not stay so far from me, for trouble is near, and no one else can help me. My enemies surround me like a herd of bulls. Fierce bulls of Bashan have hemmed me in. Like lions, they open their jaws against me, roaring and tearing into their prey. I wonder if pastors can identify with that sometimes. Can we identify with hostility, not from outside, sometimes from within the church? My life is poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax melting within me. My strength is dried up like sun-baked clay. My tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You have led me in the dust and left me for dead. Wow, that is life. That is the long haul saying, I can't do this anymore. This is tough. My enemies surround me like a pack of dogs. An evil gang closes in on me. They have pierced my hands and feet. I count all my bones. My enemies stare at me and gloat. They divide my garments among themselves and throw dice for my clothing. O Lord, do not stay far away. You are my strength. Come quickly to my aid. Those verses I've just read, you must think, it can't really get any worse than that. And even as we sit here today, I don't think we're as bad as that. We haven't experienced it to that degree. Why is that important? Well, that's important because we have to know that the one in Psalm 22 in Jesus is also the shepherd in Psalm 23. Before I get to Psalm 23, I want you to remember that Psalm 22, he has experienced everything and more than you will experience. That's important. Just hold that in your mind. Then he goes on to say, save me from the sword, spare my precious life, snatch me from the lion's jaws and from the horns of these wild oxen. And then he says, this is where purpose comes in. I will proclaim your name to my brothers and sisters. I will praise you among your assembled people. There's a change now with this praise that comes in. Praise the Lord, all you who fear him. Honor him, all you descendants of Jacob. Show him reverence, all you descendants of Israel. For he has not ignored or belittled the suffering of the needy. What a reassurance for us. We are needy, aren't we? He has not turned his back on them, but has listened to their cries for help. He hears our cry. I will praise you in the great assembly. I will fulfill my vows in the presence of those who worship you. The poor will eat and be satisfied. All who seek the Lord will praise him. Their hearts will rejoice with everlasting joy. We've gone from devastation, heartache, discouragement, to everlasting joy. That's the destination. That's our journey. That is our journey, and we'll see that in Psalm 23. For royal power belongs to the Lord. He rules all the nations. Remember, we're going to go to Psalm 23, verse 1, which says, the Lord, that's who we're talking about here. He rules all the nations. Let the rich of the earth feast and worship, bow before him, all who are mortal, all whose lives will end as dust. Our children will serve him. Future generations will hear about the wonders of the Lord. That's what we're hearing here. Everything that we've heard here about the wonders of the Lord. What an encouragement for us as we come to ELF. His righteous acts will be told to those not yet born. Whenever we're at ELF, whenever we're mixing together, we're hearing all the stories, we're in churches, we're doing our pastoral work. What are we doing? We're passing the baton to the next generation, and in another 2 or 3 generations, that we will not be remembered, but he will be. That will be passed through the next generations. So I want now to think again and help us to refresh our minds. Now that we have a picture of Christ in Psalm 22, I want us to understand who the shepherd is in the 23rd Psalm, because that's where we're going next. Everything we see must be through the lens of Christ and how he reveals the character of God. Why is that important? Because we need to understand that the 23rd Psalm that talks about the shepherd is our leader, and we need to understand that he is trustworthy as a leader. And if we are able to follow him and trust him, that will have implications for how we lead as well. You can only really do something if you're shown how to do something. Many books will say this is how you do something, but you need to be shown how to do something. You can have how-to books, but Jesus shows us how to lead. He shows us how to live, and the 23rd Psalm is a pattern for that. Now, Luke 12, verse 32 says, fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. One of the things that I find with people who are looking for a long time in ministry and sustenance in ministry and a bit of discouragement in ministry is that sometimes we can fall into thoughts that the kindness of the Good Shepherd, the kindness of God might be a thin veneer of kindness, and it hides a very harsh and demanding headmaster mentality, always there ready to catch us out, or a difficult boss looking for the mistake. We really need to let the truth of that verse from Luke sink in. It's not a reluctant or half-hearted expression of kindness that he gives us a part in his kingdom and we have unity with Christ. It is out of sheer love and kindness and absolute delight. The humble act that Jesus had in riding the donkey into Jerusalem, which showed his humility, is not tossed aside. It's always there. He's not waiting to catch us out. He's not waiting to judge us in a harsh way against some standard of what we have to achieve. He's not looking at us like that. And I think sometimes we fall into the mentality of thinking somehow that we need to do better for God. We need to live better. We need to do better. We need to measure up to some artificial measurement in our own head that doesn't actually exist. We need to recalibrate how we assess what we're doing. Sometimes I think we're very careful in our doctrinal debates within churches, how we deal with people. We always remind others and or perhaps ourselves quite a lot of the standard that God expects, that the judgment and standards that we haven't reached. We are talking about repentance. We also talk about grace. And we use a lot of these terms, but sometimes I think there's a quiet, hidden belief behind that busy day that God is always angry. God isn't angry with us at all. That's one of the things we're going to see. We might use our obsession sometimes, I think, with doctrinal debates or issues of difference between other denominations, which might distract us from looking into our own heart and how we actually see God. Sometimes these debates can be distraction. We can feel good because we hold a position which we regard as scripturally correct, but we don't want to look at our own heart really too closely, because that is easier to do, talk about others and look at ourselves. So the verse in Luke is the absolute opposite of those views. He is generous to us because he wants to be, not because he needs to be. God determines his will without constraint. There's no restriction on how he thinks. He wants and does give his kingdom to his flock. In John 15, verse 13, we read, "Greater love has no one than this, than that someone lay down his life for his friends." Well, there's the example. John 10, verse 18 says, "No one takes my life from me. I lay it down of my own accord." He planned the path to the cross. He executed the plan. He does the same for us. He doesn't sacrifice his sheep. He is the good shepherd. He cares for them. He became a lamb so we don't have to. And I think sometimes we feel that we're sort of sacrificed in their ministries, that somehow we have to give something. And whilst we do have to surrender ourselves to Christ, it isn't in the sense sometimes that we think it is. We're not surrendering our lives in the sense that we get nothing back. We get a better life back. But how do we do this? Well, the consequence of the character of the Good Shepherd is that he enables us to draw near to God. Hebrews 7, verse 25. "Consequently, he is able to save to the uttermost those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for us." So what does that mean for our life and ministry? Let's go to the start of Psalm 23. "The Lord is my shepherd." I know that this is probably a very familiar psalm to most of us. We've read it many times. We might even have learned it. We might have preached on it many times. We might have read it in children's stories and so on. And we know the poetry and imagery of it very well. But I want to think a little bit more about it as a life psalm. I know that some people in my culture back in Ireland, a lot of the 23rd Psalm is used at funeral service, talking about death. It seems to be quite common in some cultures that we do that. But the 23rd Psalm is a psalm of daily life. It's a rhythm of life. It's a psalm about how he cares for us in everyday life. It's not about death. Who is the Lord? The Lord is my shepherd. Who is the Lord? Well, the Lord is, of course, the term Yahweh, which is used in the 23rd Psalm. This is the covenant name of God. It's pronounced like a breath. God is the essence of life, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. And he is the one who gives us life and is the sustainer of life. He also describes himself as I am. Why is that important? Well, he introduces himself as I am to Moses. He has no name. He exists and always has existed. So he does what he wants. He doesn't rely on anybody else for anything. He's the absolute creator. What did he also do? He gave us identity. He's the one that we get our identity from. He is the I am. We don't get our identity from anybody else or anywhere else. We are part of a society that is obsessed with identity. You can't escape the discussion in our culture on identity. We are told to affirm self-proclaimed identities. But the only way we can understand our identity is the foundation of our purpose, which is to know where our identity comes from. We are created in the image of God, as Peter Williams has identified in our talks. He formed us. He knew us. So how can we know where our identity comes from? And what is the identity? God gives identity. I wonder if you ever asked yourself, what is my identity? Who am I? Sometimes whenever I speak about this with people, they say, I've actually never really asked that question. But for me, people say to me, I know what your identity is. Well, you're a lawyer. Yes, I am a lawyer, yes. But I'm also other things. That's not my identity. Those are vocations. They're positions relative to other people. But it's not my identity. So a big source of stress and burnout, loss of interest in ministry, I think sometimes is not living in our God-given identity. We must ask God to confirm our identity. If we don't live according to that, then we're in trouble. So, for example, from the Bible, one of the things that the psalmist identified early, David was a shepherd boy. But while he was a shepherd boy, he was protecting the sheep. That was a foreshadowing of his future role as king. When he was protecting the sheep, he was a warrior, he was a fighter, he was a protector. That identity was still there when he became a king and warrior. The king was a vocation, a warrior was a vocation, but his identity ran through all of his life. So for you, I want you to think, just reflect on, what is it in my whole life I have been? What has God made me? Whenever you were 6 or 7 and you were painting, God made you, give you a creative identity. Whenever you're 80, you'll still want to paint. I'm a lawyer. I didn't become a lawyer until I was, 22 or 23. It didn't make my identity. My identity was finding people and helping people to live better, more fulfilling lives. How did I do that? I expressed that through the legal work that I did. I expressed it through other areas of work. But the key thing is that your identity is something that stays with you, and God has given it to you for your whole life. If you find and reflect and think about and live in that identity that God gives you, you will find a new energy and enthusiasm, and it will also tell you what you're not to do. Because I think sometimes people who are gifted, and gifting is different to identity. Whenever you're gifted, you might be good at things, and people say, well, you're gifted at that, you do that, but that might not be what you're gifted in terms of identity. It might be a vocation, it might be something you're quite good at relative to other things and other people. So we can start this by understanding that whenever David was a shepherd boy, he was defending and protecting the sheep. He was fighting the lions. He was doing all the things that he did. When he was anointed king, he wasn't king yet. He was told he was going to be king. His identity didn't change. When he became king, he still had the same identity. The problem for David came whenever he was a king and a warrior and didn't go to battle at the time the other kings went to battle. What did he do? He stayed behind and he saw Bathsheba. He wasn't living out his identity in that moment. God had placed on him a king and warrior identity which he didn't use. He was living in a different false identity, which was relaxing and enjoying the pleasures of the palace. And then he saw Bathsheba, and that brought him trouble. You might say that is a classic case of not being in ministry for the long haul. That sort of failure ends ministry. But my question is, where did it start? And where does it start for us? It starts for us in knowing what our identity is and living according to that identity that God has given us, and He has given it to us, and we can know what that is. I don't know where you get your identity from or your beliefs, but sometimes teachers at school say, you weren't very good at that, or your marks weren't very good, and you start to believe what you're being told. Somebody has labeled you in some way, perhaps in the house or in the home or in society. You've been told you're not very good at speaking. You've been told you're not a great Bible teacher. You've been told you're not a great evangelist. You've been told all of these different things. The reality is that you only need to listen to what God told you. He is the Lord, my shepherd. So, remember also that the same good shepherd in the 23rd Psalm is the same in Revelation 19, verse 11. Then I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. The one sitting on it is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. So he's not a mild shepherd. He is the king and warrior. So keep in mind the good shepherd, and verse 1 is also the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, in verse 11 of Revelation 19. And you might say, well, why is this so important? This is really, really important because we get our identity from God to us. That's where it comes from. And we are following Him as we go through the 23rd Psalm. So, now, the relational aspect of the Lord being our shepherd is very important, and it's key to everything that we do. The word shepherd was a familiar term when David wrote this psalm. He was familiar with what a shepherd was, and he knew that the shepherd was everything to the sheep. I keep sheep. I have a sheep farm as well, and one of the things about the sheep is they will find lots of ways to get into trouble. They will try to die in so many different ways. You need to be with them all the time. You need to check on them all the time. That relationship between the shepherd and the sheep is actually much more fundamental than people think. And in our society today, shepherds aren't with the sheep all the time. But in this picture, the shepherd was sleeping with the sheep at night. He was looking after them every day. He was thinking ahead all the time. So the sheep are in trouble if the shepherd is missing, and the shepherd is the only one who's the ability to look after the sheep. Because He has given us our identity, and He is looking after us as a shepherd, we need to walk and be led by Him. Do we follow Him, or do we say to people, follow me? Whenever we say, follow me, we're not going to be in ministry for the long haul. It's going to be a short ministry. It might look as if it's a long ministry on the external side. It might look like a successful ministry, but it won't be. We need to follow Him. So, in the time of David, the shepherd was synonymous with king. And the shepherd illustration was often used to illustrate king. And the king would often have, and even today in the coronation ceremonies of many kings, there has been a shepherd's crook. Defending the sheep and not losing any was also a duty. Now, when we accept and believe that the Lord is our shepherd, we can then relax. So what is the consequence of the Lord being our shepherd? I have spent years reading Psalm 23. And it was for 30 years I read Psalm 23 and didn't read the next part of it well. I read it and didn't understand it. It didn't mean what it ought to mean. And this is the bit I want you to remember. If you don't remember anything else I say today, please do remember this. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want, or I shall lack nothing. And if you think about that, is that really true? Do we really believe that? I shall not want for anything because the Lord is my shepherd. You might say, well, look, you don't understand. I do actually lack quite a lot. There's a lot of stuff I haven't got that I need. Our ministry needs more finances. I need more people. I need better elders. I need whatever, right? This is much more than that. We are challenged in this first verse to decide basically on our worldview. This is a real challenge to us in the Christian life. Because whilst we say that we shall not want, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, we even sing it. But actually inside, if we're really truthful, we kind of do want stuff that we don't have. Where do we get that desire? Well, if you remember back in Genesis, Adam and Eve in the garden, what was the first thing that caused the fall? Well, it was Eve going to the fruit, Adam and Eve thinking that God had withheld something from them, led to separation from God in the garden, being put outside. And we look back at that passage and we think, yeah, we wouldn't have done that. We would have been happy in the garden. And yet, in our hearts, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The I shall not want still reflects that desire for the apple. Did God really say that? He knew that you would have something that he's withholding from you. And we kind of think sometimes, God is withholding something from me. There's something that I'm missing. There's something I don't have. And I think sometimes that deep down, that view of our life and view of our ministry and view of everything that we see is the thing that affects us negatively. What does it lead to? Well, we're in union with Christ and in relationship with others. So we have to ask ourselves, what is our worldview? What does that verse say to us? Can I really believe that I shall lack nothing because God is my shepherd? Every day I wake up and feel a lack. And if we're all honest, we all do. That's our worldview every day. Whenever people say, what are the worldviews today? And there are many. There are basically two. And one of the worldviews is a separation worldview. We're separated from God and we live in that separation. That is the feeling of not having enough, lack. There's something more. God's withholding something. He's angry from us and so on, right? Which leads to a very much a self-focus. And if you keep going along that, so scarcity is one of the hallmarks of that scarcity mindset, which leads to a desire for certainty. So we want to be certain that we're making the right decision. We want to be certain about the next stage. We want to be certain about our life, or certain about our life partner, certain about our choices. And that leads to a desire for perfection. And then whenever we get into the mindset of having to be perfect, certain with it, and a perfect outcome, then we become more and more self-focused because we don't want to take a decision in case it's wrong and so on. And the other worldview, which is the one that we want to live in Psalm 23, which is the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not lack, is a connection worldview, which is union with Christ. We want to be united with him because that leads to abundance, a feeling of not lacking. It leads to a desire not to have stuff because we believe we have enough. Instead of having certainty, we have mystery. We know that the Bible in Revelation says God has withheld some things from us. We accept that there are things that we don't know. What a freedom, actually, to accept things that we don't know. Instead of perfection, we regard fallibility. It's okay to make mistakes in ministry. That lifts another burden. And then the consequence of that is that if we feel we've enough, we are able to have more other focus rather than self-focus. So, because the Lord is our shepherd, we don't lack anything. We also fall into this trap that scarcity is okay. We want to waken up every day and say, the Lord is my shepherd, and it's okay to feel that we don't have enough, and then to look for more. And I think that one of the difficulties with this is it leads to a cycle where we are thinking that God is withholding something from us. But at the start, we read about God is delighted to give us his kingdom to his flock. We are united with Christ, and he doesn't hold anything back from us. So this is the fact that we're in relationship, and it's a daily basis interacting with him. Now, if we realize that we have enough and he's given us enough, what else can we take from that? Well, the other thing we can take is that we are enough. He wants us in union with him. We are his focus. We are not just some program or strategy that he's deploying in the world. He wants relationship with us. He is our shepherd. He is going to look after us. Not only do we have enough, but you are enough. God has said that he loves us, and we need to learn to live accepting that he does indeed love us. Because if he doesn't love us, or if we think he doesn't, then we're like Adam and Eve in the garden thinking God is withholding something from us. Now, how does that affect us in terms of how we think? Well, it should affect us in a couple of ways. One is, it should make us feel that God is for us. He is giving us everything that we need. Now, it might not be everything we want, but I'll come to that in a moment. The next verse, it says, he makes me to lie down in green pastures. So how does the shepherd show us he is good? It says he makes me lie down in green pastures, and the green pastures don't just appear. It's not a magical, just to suddenly appear, and the shepherd goes, oh, I'm glad we've found green pastures. He has thought of where the green pastures are, and he leads us to them. And as we go through our day, or our week, or our year in the 23rd Psalm, we're now in green pastures, but there's a change coming. He has thought of where they are and when they are, and the sheep, when they are happy and full of food, they lie down. He gives us rest. When they get rested, and we can experience rest because he knows what we need and when we need it, but we need to follow him, not follow me, follow him. And this is the provision of food every day. He also gives us water. Now, sheep can only drink from still water. Their nose and mouth can't, if water's moving, they can't drink. They have to have still water that isn't moving so that they don't suck it up their nose, basically. So they can't drink from bubbling streams or fast-moving water. He wants them to be on flat ground because the water is still, so he can give them water. It's the same for us. He knows when we need still ground. We sometimes don't. We think we don't need still ground very much. And I mean spiritually still ground as well. But we follow him. We don't follow ourselves. And he will provide us with that still water. The sheep are in peace and spiritually renewed and refreshed. The next verse it says, he restores my spirit, or he re-energizes us in our journey. The Hebrew word for restore, actually, I found was a word called shwab, which means to turn back. Perhaps you need to shed the false identity or whatever it is you believe about yourself or whatever other people have told you and go back to see what God has said about you. What does he say to you and about you? And the turning back restores us. It's initiated in order to better identify with God and what he's saying to us so that he is allowed to minister to us and encourage us. I read a book that said that when people are depressed or down or feeling burned out, they don't need new ideas. They need new energy and new perspective. They need to turn back to God for refreshment. Now, the reality is that that is easy to say, but it's difficult to do. Because in our little worldview, every day when we wake up, we're in a separation mindset very often. And we need to go back to the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Does he really? Do I really believe that? Do I sit and wait for God to lead me in those green pastures? Do I wait for him to say, I love you? I sent my son to die for you. I raised him from the dead so that one day you will also be raised from the dead. We haven't got to the destiny yet of where he's taking us. We're just still on the journey. But even on the journey, we're not running hard like a marathon just trying to finish. On that marathon route or on that journey, we have places of rest. ELF is obviously one of those, I suppose, for a lot of people. This verse reminds us that he leads us in the right decisions as well. So in Micah 6, verse 8, it says that what does God require of us? And it is to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. We can only do the right thing if we don't take a turn or decide to do something out of a sense of lack or of scarcity. So whenever it says he leads us in paths of righteousness or rightness, they're often a meandering path, not usually a straight line. These paths will seem wrong or not the correct direction at various points in our lives. They tend to be narrow. So whenever you're in ministry, whenever you're living your life normally, we don't get a straight path. The right thing to do often takes us in a different direction than what we had hoped or even planned. But doing the right thing is always going and following in paths of rightness, doing the right thing, following his righteousness, because that is his character. However, when we take the correct path, we also see that truth and justice, which is held by God in perfect balance in Jesus, we see God at work, and seeing that justice can come is a long and patient waiting position sometimes. And that's also a reason I feel that sometimes we get disillusioned and disheartened in ministry, because the paths of going and doing the right thing sometimes don't lead us as we expect to the right situation. It's a path that is like a zigzag path, and sometimes it takes us in a different direction. We think we did the right thing. Why are we here? We're here because we're following him. And this is an encouragement for us. How do we follow? Well, we need God to reveal the purpose to us in each of our days. When we ask God, what do you want me to know today? And what do you want me to do today? We start to commune with him and follow him. Listening to God in prayer is basic, fundamental part of being in ministry, not only for a short time, but for a very long time. It's essential. It is a fundamental part of enjoying the leading of the shepherd and knowing that we are not in need and that we are safe and that he leads us to places where we can have rest and encouragement. So we've seen in the first few verses that God provides. Now, the next stage is God's protection. In ministry, we need provision. We've read about that. You have to choose, do I believe that or not? Ask God to show you if that's true. The next few verses are protection. And in ministry, I think you need protection. We all do in our Christian lives. And he offers protection. He says, we will walk through the valley where there are dark shadows. One of the scary things at night is seeing shadows, which can cast bigger shadows in your mind than are actual. And the shadows we see are often real concerns magnified, and in the valley they look very big. Sometimes the light isn't shining in a way that helps us to see where we're going. Sometimes it shines in a way that casts big shadows, which makes things look bigger. And it always seems that shadows make objects look bigger than they are. The shadow can be loneliness, it can be sickness, it can be a breakdown in a relationship, church membership issues, ministry partner issues, family issues. It can be all of those things. But provided we are with the shepherd, we can pass through the valley, whether it be in the afternoon as we drive home from a meeting, or in the evening as we come home from a church meeting, or in the middle of the night when we're waking up with thoughts or worries. How many people do that? We all do that. We all wake up and think, oh no, I can't believe this is happening. And you can't get to sleep because you're so troubled by things, or you feel so hurt by things. He says he has no fear because the shepherd is with him. This is the certainty of the presence of God in each valley. Shadows and fear won't affect our identity, and they don't change our purpose, and he is with us. He is still our shepherd. Fear can be a limiting factor to doing what we ought to do. So that shadow experience often can affect our ministries and can often make us feel that perhaps this isn't for us. Maybe it's just too much. The shadow is too big. Well, the shadows aren't real. They are in our mind as we see them. But we have assurance that the shepherd has a rod and a staff, which is both a protection and a guide, and it is an image of authority. He has the capacity to do whatever we need. Verse 5, we move from the third person, the Lord is my shepherd, to a conversation which is a direct face-to-face. And we have a conversation where David says, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. And this is part of our journey in communion with Christ. That connection with God is moving from a he to a you. And we need in our ministry to move from he does this to you do that. We are moving from a position of talking about God to talking to God. And that is part of our journey. That's what it means to be in communion with Christ and to know that he is our shepherd. So we learn that the same God who knew us before we were born gives us an identity, gives us our purpose, but he also prepares a table of feasting. The preparation in advance and the fulfillment of every detail of prophecy shows us that he did this willingly. We are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared for us beforehand, that we should walk in them. So the journey through the 23rd Psalm is a journey that's already prepared for us if we walk in it. We are being led by the kind of shepherd, and he is a kind shepherd, to fulfill our purpose. He says, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. The table he prepares is now in place, where we are no longer sheep in pastures, and now we have moved from sheep as followers of sheep. Now we're guests at his table. That's our destiny. So this metaphor is one which shows that we have access and relationship to the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, who is also our shepherd. We lack nothing. His provision is still evidence that we move from not lacking anything to having a table prepared, which speaks of abundance and excess. Being his guest also speaks of communion with him and worship, and being adopted into his family, we have an identity. This underlines our ability to commune with the King of Kings, and we can't come to the shepherd unless we have first understood and actually looked at and understood the cross. And when we stand every day looking at the cross and looking at the crook, we see his provision again, and we see his protection. We were reminded of the generosity of provision that he gave in surrendering his life for us. One of the things that's really important to note is that is not a plan B. God does not have a plan B. He has no plan B for your life. He only has a plan A. So your life that you're living is his plan for you. The 23rd Psalm has every experience of life. It's there for a reason. I think it's very helpful because it reminds us that all of the things that are in the 23rd Psalm we will experience on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, an annual basis, and over the course of our lives. But we also enjoy community as we feast together. He looks after his whole flock, and so should we. So we have seen something of how he has led us. Now, one of the things I want you to think about is, well, then what does that mean for how we lead other people? Well, the king invites us to his feast. The shepherd is now the king who dispenses justice. Why is there a table laid before us in the presence of our enemies? He lays a table before us in the presence of our enemies. Why? Well, we have an enemy in the form of the accuser called Satan, and the powers of evil, and those who seek to do us harm, and the people that we find are antagonistic to our ministry, hostile in church, outside church, in society, friends, family, whatever it is. But he says that he lays a table for us in their presence, the presence of our enemies. How refreshing in ministry and in life that we know that not only do we lack nothing, but the justice is not missing. Why is it in the presence of our enemies? Why is that a reassurance? Because they will see us feasting. The very people who accuse us, who cause us harm, who desire to see our ministry end, desire to see our lives affected, will have to watch as we feast with him. Not only that, but they will have to see what it is. That is a sense of justice. He does not remove our enemies, but he makes them watch as we feast at his table. And one of the things that reassures me is that as I go through life and as we face difficulty and hardship, one of the things that I've noticed is that the very people that I look back on have caused me most difficulty are still seeing me feast on the journey in my Christian life, which is a journey which is full of rest, which is full of peace, which is full of provision, which is full of protection, and they have to continue to watch it. It demonstrates to them God's provision, God's power, and the fact that I am part of his family. So, our future, our position is secure. We have provision, we have protection. What else do we have? Another P. Peace. We have peace. He gives us all we can take. The picture here is of the perfect host who prepares the table. He anoints the guest with oil, which is setting us apart, consecrating, making us welcome. It was in the custom of the day how you welcome the guest. He anoints us with oil, continues to pour into the cup. The cup overflows, not just fills it to the brim, it overflows. That is a picture of abundance in ministry and in life. Do you believe that? Is that true? As you sit here today, is what I'm saying true? Well, I can tell you, I'm only 56, right? And I don't feel that old, actually. But if I was 80, I can tell you, I know I will be able to stand here and tell you the same thing. Because, you know, over my whole life, Psalm 23 has been true. Even when I didn't believe some of it, it has been true and continues to be true. I know that God is faithful. I know he is my shepherd. I know he has given me provision, protection, and peace. Verse 6 says, only goodness and mercy shall chase me or follow me all the days of my life. We're out of the valley now. We've moved from having necessities. We're moving into a position of luxury and spiritual blessings, more than we can hold. And we revert again to the picture of sheep. Now, sheep, as you might know, never choose the narrow path. They always walk through a wide gap, even if it's into danger. They often have no purpose, and they seem to find any way to expose themselves to danger. The picture of being on this path is one where the sheep is expected to run when they sense danger. They run and picture being chased by sheepdogs or foxes or lions, as it was in those days. And one of the things that we sometimes find is that we feel chased, don't we? We feel chased by people, by rumors, by whatever it is that we're struggling with in ministry, even chased by our past, even chased by people from our past hurts, past sins, whatever it is that we feel chased by. Well, we're not chased by those things. We're only being chased by generosity. And the paranoia that comes from feeling that we're being chased is gone. We're not being chased. Really? We're not being chased by the past. We're not being chased by issues that we don't want to address. The things that come into our head from last year, those aren't chasing us anymore. No, we're not being chased. It's only goodness and mercy that chases us. That's the picture. And who doesn't want to be chased by goodness and mercy? Wow. So when we feel that our past thoughts or difficult people or whatever it is that causes that, and we feel that we're being chased, read that verse. You're only being chased by goodness and mercy. Now, I know that times we feel we want to run. I know that that is difficult. I know that some of the things I've said in the psalm is probably something that we struggle to believe. I have had to adopt this myself. I've had to question for myself, is it true? Does God really love me? Does he really provide? Is he withholding something from me? Can he really look after me? Does he really love me? Sometimes we perhaps ask that more than we admit. Does God really love us? And in the end, we see what happens. You might say, I don't think this applies to me. You don't understand my situation or how difficult my life is. You might say, I'm thinking of giving up ministry. I can't do it anymore. You might say, I've tried. You might say, I'm not sure that God came through for me in the situation last year. I have some issues with that. I'm angry with God. The church politics situation, I'm angry with Christian people. Whatever it is, you might say, does this really apply to me? Well, David wrote this psalm when he was being pursued by his own son and was in the valley. This was written by somebody in a situation which was at least equally as bad as your situation. You are not alone. This psalm applies to all of us at all times, through all generations, every day. God is not limited by time, we learned at the start. He's not limited in his power. So are we saying that somehow he doesn't manage to reach Poland in 2025? Is the psalm only applicable then? No, not at all. It applies to us. It applies to me. So, this is not a second-hand idea. What I'm trying to persuade you of is not a how-to message, how to survive for the long haul in ministry. I am not telling you how to. I haven't done, all the normal stuff, the self-help stuff. Make sure you take plenty of rest. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying if you follow Jesus and not follow yourself, you will be in ministry and you will be in life for the long haul. Psalm 23 is a journey through life. The destination which we're going to come to is very clear. It's not cutting short life or ministry. Because life and ministry are the same. We don't do it for a short haul. It's for the long haul because we don't do it. We follow him. And because we follow him, we can lead others. So how do we lead others? We lead others by following him and leading others as he leads them, which means we think ahead, we provide for their needs, we think about them, we don't just think about ourselves, we offer protection, provision, and we helpfully provide them circumstances where they can be in peace. So our destiny, which is set out in verse 6, is to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This means today, tomorrow, and all the days that lie ahead. This is not just that when we die. We are living in communion with Christ now. The presence of Holy Spirit in our lives and that communion is here now. We are in communion with Christ. The Lord is our dwelling place through all generations, the Bible says. We will live with him as sheep in the pasture. We will live with him in each valley. We will live with him, in communion with him, in the presence of our enemies, and we will live with him forever. So, just in conclusion, identity number one. How then can we ensure we maintain the long-haul fruitfulness in life? Well, first of all, we've learned that we have our identity in Christ. He is our Lord and our shepherd. It is he who knows us, and we only get our identity from him, not from other people or from society or even from ourselves. This protects us from seeking to expand our own ego or position or to seek authority over others. Often the extent of ego and our view of ourselves causes harm in ministry, which can often cut short ministry. So what I'm saying is, if we remember we get our identity from Christ, we don't get it from ourselves, it keeps our ego in check, and it stops us from seeking to demand or be coercive or manipulative or try to control others. That's also good. It also stops us from judging our ministry according to measures like numbers or revenue or seeing people converted. That's a trap I'm sure we all fall into. But remember, nothing in the 23rd Psalm was speaking about outcomes. It was a journey that we have with the shepherd. Whenever you go into the room on your own and you ask God to speak to you about your identity, he's not going to ask how many people are you going to convert. He's not going to tell you that. That's not the goal. He wants communion with you. He wants to be your shepherd. Psalm 22 told us what he gave up for us. Psalm 23 tells us what he does with us. And in the end of the journey, and always we go through, we have a destiny which we're excited by. We're going to see something different. Now, the second thing I want to say is the purpose. What greater purpose can we have but to reveal Christ to the world? There is no greater purpose. We are sent out, but we also follow. He has gone through everything we can experience. Good leadership, you can't do what you haven't been shown. You have to remember that. When you lead others, don't expect them to do stuff unless you've shown them how to do it. You live your life in the 23rd Psalm flow, they will also live their life. It is the best management tool you have ever found. Follow Jesus, not follow me. And whenever you align everybody to follow in that way, you will have fewer problems on staff. You'll have fewer problems in terms of feeling burned out. You'll have a better flow to your ministry. So we must lead with direction, but one of the things that's also important is we must lead with movement. We don't stay still. We don't park ourselves in one place and say, right, we're here. That's it. 23rd Psalm is all about movement. It's never the same. Every experience is different. We're in a different place all the time. And we have to remember that. Momentum keeps you going as a leader. Don't stop. Don't go still. Whenever Jesus says, follow me, he's not standing still. So we need to follow his leading and his guidance. We must also lead people to peace, and we must go there first. We must know what it is to be there in order to get people to go there as well. It isn't aspirational. It's not a nice picture where we can say, well, that's lovely, but I don't know if I can do that. This is reality. We can do this because he has been there first. Remember in Psalm 22? Oh man, it was difficult. And then it changed to hope. We can do the same. He has been there so we can follow. So what's our destiny? Well, our destiny is that we dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This is our destination. Where does following Jesus lead? Well, it leads somewhere. It leads to peace and unity with Christ. It is not enough to lead to a bigger church meeting or a position or career. We must lead people to his dwelling place. And for people to find him and be able to get what? Spiritual rest. Not chasing the belief that we need or should have more, but that we rest in him. That is a light burden. That is where we want to be. If we follow him, that's where we end up. So how do we do ministry in the long haul? How do we make sure it's for the long haul? Well, we don't think about the long haul. We remember where our destiny is. It's in the feast. We're going to be at a table feasting. In Revelation, we talk about the feast of the Lamb. That's where we're going to be. It goes to Revelation. It's not only in the 23rd Psalm. We don't just find this. This is like if this is an echo in the 23rd Psalm of what we're going to find in Revelation. This is the future. But it's also the present for us in the 23rd Psalm. So, that's where we're going to end up. Now, the 23rd Psalm, I'm going to read, just as I finish, one of the things I'm going to say is the 23rd Psalm, I want you to read it differently when you read it in your own time as you're facing issues. Don't take my word for it. Obviously, I'm here because this is my experience. This is my testimony, if you like. This is my actual experience of my life. I'm not telling you something that I've read because it's a commentary. This 23rd Psalm has been the flow of my life. I can testify to God's provision, and I can tell you stories of this in so many different things. The reality is, this is true. So I'm telling you this because I want you to read it and experience it for yourself. And you will if you say, Lord, show me that you are my shepherd, and show me that I shall not want, and show me you make me lie down in green pastures. He will. And someday, maybe next year, you will also stand up and you will be speaking about how God showed you who you were, what your purpose was, what your destiny, and how he refreshed and provided and protected you and gave you peace. You will be able to testify that. And you might not feel like that today, and maybe 2 or 3 years ago you would have said that, but you don't feel it today because you're worn and you're tired and you feel that it's been tough. And I get all of that. I understand that. But you know what? Read Psalm 22, how tough it was. And remember that the guy that was in Psalm 22 is our shepherd in Psalm 23. You can't do what you haven't been shown. He has shown us the whole way through, and he's shown us where we end up, and we are secure in him. So, 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, relationship, unity with Christ. I lack nothing, full supply. He makes me lie down in green pastures, rest. He leads me beside still waters, refreshment. He refreshes my soul, healing. He guides me along the right paths, guidance. For his name's sake, for his glory, purpose. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, testing, I will fear no evil, protection. For you are with me, faithfulness. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me, discipline. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, hope. You anoint my head with oil, consecration. My cup overflows, abundance. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, blessings. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And what's that? Security forever. That's the 23rd Psalm. And that's why your ministry will be fruitful for the long haul, because what you've just heard is true and will be your reality, because the God who wrote the 22nd Psalm and the 23rd Psalm, the God who spoke to me and provided for my life, is the same God that you can talk to and be in communion with every day and walk through every day of life with the God who is the Good Shepherd in the 23rd Psalm.